Chapter 13. The Saturday morning after the interview with Samantha Merriam at Place Wernlas and his encounter with Chief Superintendent Harding, Gwendraeth James got up earlier than usual and was in the kitchen drinking his second cup of coffee and arranging his tools on the table in front of him when the doorbell rang. He thought he might as well get started on hanging the new kitchen cupboards, the ones that had now been sitting in their flat packs for over 3 months, and he was annoyed at the interruption. He walked down the hallway and opened the door to his first surprise of the day. "Don't worry, I'm not trying to come back." She stood before him in jeans and a loose green anorak, which went well with her blonde hair. Sheila, his soon-to-be ex-wife. "Who said I was worried? There's something to say. Didn't mean anything." She looked relaxed enough. She wasn't wearing any makeup, and there was a faint flush on her cheeks. He had to admit she looked attractive. "Don't tell me you've turned handyman at last." He looked down to see that he was still holding a Phillips screwdriver, the one with which he'd intended to assemble the cabinets. He told her about it. "Are those the same ones?" Gwendraeth nodded as they stood there on the doorstep, sizing each other up. "Well, aren't you going to ask me in?" "Do you want to come in?" he said. He tried to keep his tone as neutral as possible. Sheila said she did, and then followed him back down the hall towards the kitchen. "John's father got taken into hospital. Kidney stones. We're down for the weekend." "Staying with them?" As they went into the kitchen, Gwendraeth cleaned a place so that Sheila could sit down. "Just as well I wouldn't try to stay here, isn't it?" Gwendraeth looked at his estranged wife to see if she was testing him. She was as difficult to decipher as ever. "Anyway, I've come to see you about something else." "Yes?" "Your Uncle Edward. Remember my phone call?" "That was only a few days ago. I've been intending to go." Gwendraeth was telling the truth. The fact that Edward could sometimes be difficult might have added to the delay, but not much. "Elsie called me again, so go and see him. Please." "Okay." "Is that all you've got to say?" "Yes, unless you'd like a cup of coffee." "I might, but not in this kitchen, with cups unwashed and the cabinets not even installed. Not in a month of Sundays." "I won't offer you one then." "No, just as well." "Thanks for the message." "You know, Gwendraeth," Sheila said as she got up to leave, "you wouldn't be unattractive if you could be bothered to make an effort." "Thanks very much." "No, I mean it. What's it going to take to shake you out of yourself? I'm all right. I got my work." She turned towards him near the front door. "Same problem. We keep going round in circles, don't we?" And then she was gone. Later that same day, Gwendraeth James drove over the bridge, through the roundabout, and up the hill to the other side of Miser Bond. There, if he looked back, he could see the meandering river lying in its own floodplain, and above it, the tightly packed streets of the old town, which were fronted by the council administrative offices and the remnants of a medieval castle. He drove alongside the river for a while, past the old stone-built wharfs, where sailing ships had tied up over a century ago, when the town had been the centre of the guano trade from South America. Then he began to climb up a narrow road until he reached a renovated gatehouse that had once marked the boundary of an old estate. The road itself went through the gatehouse and ended in a neat gravel circle of newish bungalows, immaculately set down on a resisting landscape. From the farthest of these came the sound of a motor mower. Gwendraeth James stopped the car, got out, and walked towards the source of the sound. A youngish man in a peaked hat was operating the mower, and he was being watched over by an old one who sat on a garden bench nearby. There was a blanket over his knees, which he tossed off as soon as he saw his approaching visitor. "Oh, it's you." "Who else did you expect? Richard Burton?" "He dead, isn't he? Died a long time ago." "Hello, Uncle Edward. Long time no see, boy. Where the hell have you been?" It wasn't a question Gwendraeth wanted to answer right then. It had been over 6 months since he'd last seen his uncle and aunt. In that time, his wife had left him. He started drinking again. He didn't feel like explaining himself. "How's the job?" "You know. When you were a boy, Gwendraeth, you used to be quite talkative. Sometimes I wonder what's happened to you." "Sometimes I wonder the same thing." They laughed together then, and the tension eased. Gwendraeth could never have said that his Uncle Edward was an easy man. He was much too volatile for that. But there had always been a kind of understanding between them. It had been Edward, for instance, who had suggested that Gwendraeth consider following him into the police force as a career. It was something Gwendraeth had to feel grateful to him for. "Anything interesting come up lately?" "Not a lot. Usual. Possible murder day before yesterday. Body in a ditch." The sound of the lawnmower stopped, and the man who'd been operating the machine unhooked the bag full of grass cuttings and disappeared with it behind the garage. "That's Gwyn, Elsie's sister's husband's cousin. He hadn't got a job, so I let him cut the grass. You're not really good. Too much overlap." "Since when did you care about overlap?" Edward laughed then. It turned into a cough, and he showed his yellow teeth. You mean you don't think I was over meticulous?" No comment. "I always did my job, boy, always. There might have been those who didn't like the way I did it, but they're not right in the history books, are they? They've already outlived most of them anyhow. That was the thing your mother told me on her deathbed, you know. She was lying in that private room in a sanatorium, the one your father insisted on paying for, and then he had to sell his house." "I know." "Anyhow, she was lying there, and she turned to me and said, 'You were the one with Dad's genes, Edward. If you cleaned yourself up, you could live to be 100. "And did you? "Clean yourself up? Course not. Didn't stop smoking till last year. How old was I? 83. And I wouldn't have stopped them if they hadn't slapped that tax on it. Punishing us, they are." "What makes you say that?" "You know me, Gwendraeth. It could never be said that I was on the side of the establishment. Sometimes I think they made me pay for it." They sat in silence for a while. Gwyn came back with the empty lawnmower bag. Then he turned the machine over and began cleaning out the wet grass cuttings with a screwdriver. "That body you found in the ditch, that was near Treveg Rectory, wasn't it?" Gwendraeth nodded in reply. "How did you know?" "I'm not stupid, am I? I got enough brains left to read the newspaper. That was the place that was bought up recently by that cabinet minister. Always had a bit of dodgy reputation, that place has. In the old days, they used to say that was the place the vicars went when they wanted a bit on the side." "What are you getting at, Edward?" "I'm not getting at anything, boy. I'm just letting you know. There are two constants in this world: influence and power, sometimes known as power and influence." Gwendraeth's uncle then laughed at his own joke. "Gwendraeth, why didn't anybody let me know you were here?" A small, thin woman in a pair of brown slacks bustled her way across the lawn towards them. "Is he hiding you from me?" "Hello, Elsie." She came up to him, and they gave each other a brief hug. "Got my message then? I was beginning to wonder." "What message?" Edward's coughing fit had now subsided. "Never you mind. If I called Sheila to tell Gwendraeth I wanted to see him, that's my business. There was a pause. How is she? She's fine, Gwendraeth said. I suppose. You suppose? Just saw her this morning. She sent her regards. Something's happened between you two, hasn't it? I prefer not to talk about it. Well, you know what your mother always said. There may not be anything wrong with taciturnity, but there may not be much right with it either. Gwendraeth was feeling uncomfortable. Then Edward chipped in, making it worse. If I were you, boy, I'd try not to lose her. We may have done that already, Gwendraeth said, looking away to the middle distance. Above the river, a Welsh flag fluttered on the remains of the battlements of the medieval castle. He felt suddenly cold, in spite of the afternoon sunshine. Anyway, you'll stay to tea. It was a command rather than a request, and there was no getting round it. Elsie turned to make her way back to the house, and Gwendraeth helped his uncle up, and then walked him back to the house. After tea, an hour or so later, Edward had visibly tired, and while he was nodding off in his armchair, Elsie beckoned to Gwendraeth, who joined her at the other end of the living room. He wants you to have this, she said, handing him a small cardboard box. What is it? Doing my memoirs, he calls it. He takes the tape recorder into the bedroom. He won't even let me listen. You're sure? Gwendraeth looked into the box. There were 3 or 4 tapes and a micro-cassette recorder. Of course I'm sure. You're a policeman, aren't you? In many ways you're closer to him than Brian. We don't see that much of him now he's moved to Newport. Brian was Gwendraeth's slightly younger cousin. Apart from playing rugby together years ago, they'd never had much in common and had not seen each other for 3 or 4 years. Edward's not well, Gwendraeth. He knows that. That's why he wants you to have these. Is he finished with them then? Aunt Elsie nodded. Her expression changed and she placed a hand on his arm. I went into the bedroom last Sunday. He'd gone quiet and I was afraid he'd had a stroke or something. I found him staring out of the big picture window looking at the garden shed. Recorder was in his lap. Well, it's bloody that, he said. I'm not even sure he noticed I was in the room. Later he told me he wanted to make certain you had the tapes, so that's why I phoned Sheila. She didn't tell you we were separated? No. You could have phoned me. She's easier to talk to, isn't she? Always used to be, anyhow. I'll go and thank him, Gwendraeth said, changing the subject, and looking across the room to where his uncle was still dozing. No, don't wake him. He doesn't sleep much as it is. Then he gets crotchety. You say goodbye to him for me then. Of course I will. And I've got 2 things to say to you before you go. The first is about Sheila. I know. No, you don't. Not at all. You need to fight for that woman if you want her. I'm not sure I do. Then the more fool you. Just because I'm your auntie doesn't mean I don't know what's good for you. Another thing, don't leave it so long next time. Then Elsie opened the front door and Gwendraeth stepped into the declining afternoon light. The lawn had been cut immaculately, except for the places where there was too much overlap. Edward had been right, after all. Gwendraeth smiled to himself as he got into his car and started it up.